Five, four, three, two, one.
Welcome to the G-Spot,
where we've got a few things to look at. I was just thinking you sound a lot like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Okay, G1, race 8, Gary's penalty. So we didn't really see this fully on the race, Ray. So we'll look at it from sort of like the commentator's view. Can't really see a lot going on this view whatsoever, other than SGP heading into the barrier. Okay, so let's ride.
Like SGP messes up.
Yeah, so let's ride on board with SGP. You see SRI is behind him, Gary closing in the space. There's a little bit of a touch there and another touch, and now Gary coming through, and off SGP goes. So let's have another look at that, shall we? So looking at it from Gary's view then, now talking about fair range, well, there isn't really anywhere for Gary to go. This is fine, but that touch there is what, and that touch there, and that touch there is what kind of is not right and ended up off the track.
Touch him up.
Yeah. So at this point, okay, you could say Gary is within fair range to make the move on SRI. Moving over to here, absolutely fine. Closing in towards the back of SGP is fine, but that touch, that's what creates a little bit of space, but not enough space for Gary's car. The second contact here, there is not enough space for Gary's car there. The second contact creates a bit of a space, now Gary's into it. So this is now a push to pass, but Gary can't stay on the road himself. So Gary hasn't left space on the exit of the corner either. View it from SRI's position. You don't really see a lot here. SRI's leaving space. SGP is getting nudged, but this is where you'll get to, Gary is way off the track, unfortunately. So, in that situation, I guess I'd probably say the first contact initiated a push to pass scenario. The second contact helped the push to pass scenario, created a bit of a space that wasn't really there that Gary then went into, but then Gary also pushed SGP wide and off the track and couldn't stay on the track himself. So I think the first contact initially, there wouldn't be anything in that had Gary then not had the second contact and gone into that little gap. So yeah, if it had just been the first bit and Gary stayed where he was, there'd be nothing in that. But unfortunately, the two contacts and then forcing SGP out wide is why Gary's ended up getting a penalty. Anything to add there, Ray?
No, as you can see, as a kind of push to pass.
Yeah.
Force the car off track.
Yeah.
There was so many things you could have called it, but stewards called it what they called it, but it's all the same unfair overtake. It's basically unfair. You're forcing somebody off the track to gain advantage and not staying on the track yourself as well.
Yeah, I mean, even if Gary had stayed on the track, I think it'd still be a penalty, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If it had stayed on the track and left space for SGP, it would still have been a penalty. Excuse me.
I don't think after the few so many contacts, I don't think other than waiting, I don't think anything would be able to change the steward's mind. Yeah,
true. I should quickly mention as well, because thinking about it, I didn't do a proper introduction. For anyone that's never seen the G-Spot before, or as we're calling this, the DGT-G-Spot, so that we don't get banned. If you don't know what DGT is, check out the race videos we do. And these are weird things that happen in the races, which we've now separated into its own thing. I probably should have said that at the start, but it was too sexy the way Ray says it. It got me all wet. Oh, sorry, no, that's just a water leak. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't think there was anything that Gary could have done other than waiting for him that would have avoided a penalty, because he was behind him. He's nudged him from behind. Created
He's nudged him from the side. He's nudged him
But
with his arse.
I mean, I mean, you're right. You could have called it any number of offences, but yeah, it's.
You're taking your mouth. You're taking your mouth away from the mic.
I did, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was effectively. It started off as a push to pass and ended up in an unfair overtake by forcing somebody off the track. So, if Gary was unsure about why a penalty was given in that one, it is because there was no space for him to go into to attempt the overtake. He's created the space by nudging SGP a couple of times, and even though, as I'm saying, he's created a bit of space, he's had to also be 2 wheels off the track to fit into that gap. So yeah, it's all a bit unfortunate, really. And considering that we were talking push to passes last week, I think it's interesting that this is a push to pass scenario. Now, on the back of this, Gary did ask me the question. He asked me to have a look at something that happened at Brands Hatch. So that's what we're going to have a look at next. So I'll give us a quick countdown to play here. So 3, 2, 1, play. Okay, so G2, race 6. Gary wondered if this is a push to pass. Interestingly, it was SGP on Gary. From the spectate view, I wouldn't say it was a push to pass at all. But let's have a look at the different camera angles. So Gary heading down towards Graham Hill Bend, turns in, and SGP's appeared out of nowhere. I can understand why Gary may have been a bit frustrated or surprised by that one, but if we look at it, is SGP within fair range? Yes, he's in position to potentially attempt an overtake. He's now definitely in position, he's in control of his car, and that for me is a fair overtake. Looking from slightly further back, so he's within fair range, he's not out of control, he's alongside, Gary's turned in for the corner, not realised SGP is there, and Gary's ended up off wide. So for me, no, it's not a push to pass. Yes, he was there fairly. He hasn't pushed Gary off the track. Gary's turned in for the corner and SGP was there. However, from Gary's view, it looks like Gary's turning in for the corner and SGP has smashed him off the track. And that's why we say it's always worth looking at the footage.
Yeah, that just looks like somebody in fair range getting in the space, the doors open, and then Gary just turning in, and the contacts made him go a bit wide. Yeah,
I mean, it's SGP was definitely there fairly because he's alongside way before the corner, but he ticked all the boxes on that one. But I can understand why, from Gary's view, it came as a bit of a surprise, and yeah, it felt like it was a hit on him. I did explain what I thought to Gary prior, but I just think it's very handy to show, because obviously Gary's just been penalised for a push to pass at the previous race. However, he thought someone had done a push to pass on him previously, so actually being able to show, I think, is a big reason as to why we're sort of doing this. Okay, should we have a look at the next one then, Ray?
Yep.
Okay, countdown to playing. 3, 2, 1, play. Okay, G3, race 8, Dave's late spin. This one we saw on the race footage, but we only had it from the spectators' view, which is what we're looking at now. So Dave and Ray battling, Gary sneaking into the space fairly, I will say. Gary now having a cheeky look up the inside of Dave, and I'll mention about that in a moment. Dave gets a little bit wide, and then the camera changes and Dave's going off. So, did Gary get into this position fairly?
Oh, this is where you're playing Sarai.
Yeah, well, Gary, I'll go through it. Gary does get into this position fairly. SRI's going for a switchback, but Gary's there. Gary then goes up the inside of Dave here, which it turns out he'd already done at least once in the race. Dave and Gary give each other space. Gary just, if he'd have made contact with Dave there, right, Gary would have been at fault. Luckily for Gary, he was just ahead of Dave. And if you're going to go all the way to the edge of the track in this scenario like this, you've got to make sure you're ahead. But Dave, unfortunately, gets sideways, tags the side of SRI and spins around. So the reason for Dave ending up off is he's giving Gary space. He gets on the marbles, dips a wheel just on the curb, and around he goes. But I mean, I would say that nobody's done anything wrong in that scenario. It's very fine margins. It's just the move that Gary did into the hairpin to get up alongside SRI, fine. The move that Gary did to get up alongside Dave the Harp, fine. The move that Gary did on the exit of the corner going all the way to the edge of the track is fine as long as you are ahead. That was probably as tight as you'd want to have it.
You must have had the radar eyes on there.
Yeah. And interestingly, I mean, feel free, folks, to scroll back in a moment, but in the video clip we just had at Brands Hatch, okay, it would be very easy for Gary, for example, who may watch this, going, well, why have you not mentioned about Brands Hatch? SGP went all the way to the edge of the track. Right. Well,
Gary wasn't there.
Exactly. That's why I never mentioned it. I'd already checked, and obviously Gary was off the track at that point, so SGP's used all of the road. And it is something that I've mentioned before. I've sort of mentioned, sort of in passing, that there may be occasions where I personally overtake someone and then sweep all the way out to the edge of the track. But I'm only doing it when I've seen that I am ahead. Now, to the other person, it may feel like I just did it anyway without knowing, but I haven't. If I...
Sorry, on you.
I was going to say, because if I do sweep out to the edge of the track and I hit someone, it's a genuine mistake. I've not meant to do it. I would only ever go all the way to the edge of the track when I've looked and thought I was clearly ahead.
Yeah, we don't have the... Well, we have the rule that you always give a car width to the car beside you when you're overtaking and that. And adds a car width of track for them to drive on. Yeah. So you can't go in for a move and then push them off the track saying you own it because you've got the racing line. There is a racing line, but in Dynamic GT League,
there's no such thing.
There's no such thing as once you're on the racing line, you own the racing line. Doing overtakes or whatever. So yeah, that was a close call for Gary. When I seen it, I was like, whoa, Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I was the same when I first looked. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Dave may have reacted a bit on his steering to that as well, but there's literally a tiny little bit of Dave's rear left tyre that got on the curb, and that was what caused him to then lose the rear. I think his tyres may have been suffering a bit as well, but I think, it may have made him jump a little bit. I mean, especially if Dave was using the in front of the car view, because that would have, I mean, I should have clipped that in actually, because that would have been sort of out of nowhere. All of a sudden he's looking up Gary's arsehole. It wouldn't be a nice sight. But yeah, so...
Would have been yabba doing.
But like I say, it's one of those. He's done nothing wrong, but he's got to be careful doing that. Because if it did make a bit of contact with Dave, if you're Dave in that situation, I could understand getting annoyed with that one. As for going for the move up the inside, as I mentioned,
Perfect.
It was, and I was a little concerned. I was like, okay, is it risky? Yes, it is. But in looking for that clip, I did see that Gary and Dave had been side by side through that corner at least once before. So
you've got that trust because you've already done it.
Exactly.
So you've got that trust with the other driver.
Yeah, Gary knows Dave's going to give him the space. Dave knows Gary's going to give him the space. And on this occasion, it was just unfortunate that Dave got a little bit wider than he wanted to be and got onto the marbles. And yeah, so I don't fault Gary at all. Good driving. Just be careful when you go to sweep out to the edge of the track. Okay, should we have a look at the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, let's give us a countdown to 3, 2, 1, and play. Okay, G4, race 8, Gary's in a Senna. I'm trying to think what this one is now. Oh, right, yeah, if you no longer go for a gap. So, we didn't see this on the footage, but Gary coming in on Rich there. Well, actually, I'll go through this, and then when we've looked at the clips, I'll mention where this has come from. So, having a look at this, Gary's behind Rich, and at this point, Gary, I would say, is not in fair range. At the braking point, he's way too far back to attempt an overtake here. Gary's on the brakes, finds himself coming into this corner deep, tags the side of Rich, backs out of it completely, and lets Rich go. Okay, first of all, I'll mention the reason that we're having a look at this on the last DGT Stewards report. Well, not the last one, because now this is when this comes out, that'll be for race 9. For race 8 Stewards report, it was noted on there that a driver had mentioned there was a few potential overtakes that were done that perhaps were a bit too physical, and they didn't necessarily want to report anyone, but they wanted it bringing to everyone's attention. I think the terminology, you might have the message there, Ray, but I think the terminology was along the lines of just a reminder to drivers that if you're overtaking someone and you're hitting them to overtake them, you need to be given the position back. But that's where this is all useful, because we're able to then show a situation like that. Okay, Gary's got it slightly wrong, but if it was reported, he's not going to get a penalty. But I think Gary would be aware on that occasion he got his braking wrong. But there's a couple more that we're going to have a look at where, from both drivers' perspective, one driver may think what they did was fine, the other driver may think what happened was a bit over aggressive. I think maybe at the time the comments was asked like, was that okay? I don't know. It's not always easy to know for certain. I mean, I know I had it recently where I didn't know if I'd hit Gary or not. And even though I was the one driving, I didn't know if I'd actually hit him off the track or not.
That was
one of the
down at the hairpin.
The Sardinia circuit. I didn't know if I'd made contact with him, and I didn't know if I was the reason that he ended up having to take evasive. In that split second, I couldn't answer that question, and sometimes that's the situation. So for the few that we're going to have a look at, what I will say is, for those people that are involved, don't take this as a dig or a negative dig. Take this more as a, at the time...
Dick.
What was that? Dick?
Dick.
Yeah. Well, take it more as a, at the time, I don't think anybody knew what the situation was, but now in hindsight, we can educate people from it. So that's what led us to this one with Gary. Gary's got his braking wrong. He's not hurt Rich, really, but he's done the right thing in making sure he doesn't gain anything. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Excuse me. So 3, 2, 1, go. Are we? We're halfway there. Right. 3, 2, 1, play. Okay. G5, race 8, a fair overtake. So this, I believe, is Hay and Rich. It is. So I've put it on the spectator view to begin with, because as commentators, this is what we would potentially see. And from this view, we don't really see much. A little bit of contact there, and a little bit of contact there. Not a lot we can see in it. So from a commentator, we could say whatever we want. We don't really know what's just happened there. So if we ride on board with Rich now, heading up to the corner, he's on the brakes and turning into the corner, and he's just been nudged from the side, and here comes Hay. So if we look at it from Hay's view, so Twilight and Rich have been compromised a little bit there. Hay's tagged the back of Rich, but we do the usual thing. Is Hay within fair range to make an overtake ahead? The answer is no. He's not close enough to Twilight to make an overtake on Twilight. He's braked way too late.
Big break.
Yeah, he's braked way too late and made contact with the side of Rich. Now, there are a few different sort of aspects to this. I can't remember how many clips I've done of it, but Hay does brake way, way, way too late for the corner. Yes, he's got it slowed down and he's just about on the apex, but number one, he was not close enough to attempt the overtake fairly there on Twilight, let alone Rich. So, as I say, don't take it as a dig, because one of the things I was looking at it when I was recording those clips was he may find that he can brake that late for that corner. Personally, I know I can't. If I brake that late for that corner, I'm going straight on. Now, I don't know if he has any additional assists on, whether maybe could be a pad hack, maybe anti-spin, I don't know. Maybe ABS is on high, I don't know. But that's where I would say it doesn't matter what assist you've got. It doesn't matter where you think you can brake and make the corner. What matters is, are you close enough to the car ahead to fairly attempt the overtake? And the answer there straight away is no. On Twilight is not close enough to attempt the overtake. Now let's say, for example, yeah, I know, Hay was not close enough to Twilight to make the overtake.
I thought you said Twilight wasn't close enough.
No, Hay was not close enough to Twilight to make the overtake.
Yeah.
Now, had Rich not been there and Hay made that move on Twilight, if I was Twilight, I'd be a bit miffed, because that is the definition of a dive bomb for me. Way too far back, and really, Twilight could easily have been turning into the corner as he would have expected to have been doing. And that's where Twilight would have turned in, Hay would have come flying through and hit Twilight, and then the questions would have been asked. Now, what has happened is Twilight hasn't turned in. I don't know if he's seen Hay coming or not, or whether he's looking at doing a switchback on Rich, I don't know. But I do think Twilight has looked in the mirrors, looked at the radar and gone, Hay is too far back, I don't need to worry about him. And I think that's right. Rich has chosen not to defend the corner. He's got Twilight close enough to him to potentially attempt the overtake, but Twilight doesn't risk it. So Rich is turning into the corner as you would expect him to. Because Hay has come in there so fast, Rich has had zero opportunity to see where Hay has come from or do anything about it once Hay's got there. So that's why I think if that had been reported, that would potentially be an unfair overtake on the grounds of it's too far back to even attempt it to begin with. And then anything that happens from that point would be on Hay. Now, before I ask you for your views on that, Ray, what I will add is, as I mentioned, if at that moment in the race Hay has said to Rich, "Oh, Rich, was that okay?" if Rich doesn't know where Hayes come from or how the situation has occurred, Rich may not know how to answer that question. And even if Twilight was to say, yeah, it was a bad one, that, I think you should wait for him, we all know that Twilight's a wind-up merchant. So, what was it? I think he told Fluffy to wait for someone after they pitted a week or so ago. So Twilight is a wind-up merchant. Now, I'm not saying that I don't believe Twilight, but I do know he's a wind-up merchant. So, what are your thoughts on that, Ray?
He came from too far back. Did make contact. So,
Well, he made the corner though. He had no problem. What's the problem? I don't see what the problem is. He made the corner fine.
it's a dive bomb.
Well, what's the definition? I'm kind of playing devil's advocate. What's the definition of a dive bomb? Blah blah blah.
Definition of a dive bomb is coming from.
How can you say that?
Late,
But I was in control of my car.
you can be in control of your car no matter what you're coming for. Too far back, the driver ahead's not. Two cars ahead isn't going to know that you're coming in. You're braking far too late, especially within a pack. So
Yeah, I mean, from an admin's or a steward's perspective, any argument dies at you were too far back to even attempt it. And any, I mean, this may sound like I'm sort of dissing Hay, but any argument of, but I made the corner, is null and void. You were too far back.
yeah, you made the corner, but you had contact.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, okay, Gary and SGP at Brands Hatch, Gary turned in and made contact with SGP, right? Now, I can't use that same terminology with this one. I can't say that Rich turned in and hit Hay, because with SGP and Gary, they were side by side before the corner, before the turning point. With this one, they're not side by side until the contact.
At least.
Yeah, so that's why I wouldn't say that Rich turned in on Hay. That would be a Hay has hit Rich. So, yeah. So what I would say is, Hay, when it comes to attempting overtakes like that, first off, you could be asking yourself, am I close enough to potentially... It doesn't matter where you brake, how fast you think you can go into it. Let's face it, I'm one of the fastest drivers we have. And I...
Are you?
I'm not sure. Not when I've had a drink. But yeah, I still adhere to that same sort of policy of, am I close enough to potentially attempt the overtake fairly? And by that, am I within a range that the driver ahead has the possibility to know I could go for? And yeah, I would definitely just say be careful. If you're not within a...
No, something that I would like to add in is, also when you're racing in a pack, there's a different kind of driving style at corners, because you're at so many cars in a group that
They're slower.
even though you're attacking the guy in front of you, he's trying to attack the guy in front of him, then you've got to try and pick and choose your overtakes, especially in a pack, because if you do a late dive bomb like that, a dive bomb or whatever, unfair overtake like that, when there's so many close together, it just affects everybody.
Yeah, I mean, a good example would be Red Bull Rings Turn 2. If you've got a pack of 8 cars all battling, then they're going to be...
the 8th car, and you're thinking, yeah, I can get a couple of places
Well,
here.
we see, I was actually thinking the 9th car that is much further back, the 8 cars ahead are side by side with each other. They're going a bit slow. Oh, well, yeah, they're not that close to me. I can brake at 100 metres because that's where I brake and I can get round the corner. Well, you can't do it fairly, can you?
No.
No,
Not
because
when they're all battling and you're coming from
too
way
far
back.
back.
Yeah.
And that's one of the key points on that kind of thing. It is from too far back. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so countdown to play and 3, 2, 1, play. Okay, G6 race 8. Deja vu. Okay, it's Hay and Rich again. Down into turn 1. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, so it looks like Hay may have come in a little bit quick, so it's potentially the same thing. So let's have a look. So Gary peels into the pits. Hay's next to Rich. Rich has got a bit twitchy there. I think they kind of compromise each other a little bit. This time, Rich. Well, I think Rich is ahead at this point, and now Hay's coming in. I think Rich has sort of gone to cover the middle of the road a little bit. But obviously, we don't get to see everything there. I've got the different camera angle on. So, yeah, so Hay's behind. So, at this point, if you were the car in front.
Yeah. Remember, but you must say about the mirror.
Yeah, I was going to. It looks like he's too far. It looks like he's too far back in that mirror. So the question would be: is he too far back? Now, there's a bit of contact between the two here, but we're looking for: is Hay within fair range? And no, for me, I would say he's just out of fair range here. But
I'd say border.
Yeah, I mean it's close, but very late on the brakes, and on this occasion doesn't quite get it to the apex. So looking at it from a bit further back, yes, the space is there for him to go into, but he doesn't quite get that turned in on.
Is he locked up? He turns and then he...
Well, I don't know if he's locked up, but it looks like as it's sort of slow-mo in here, he was turning towards the corner and then it goes straight on a bit, and then he tries turning in a bit more, and then all of a sudden he's understeering and now he's moving away from the apex curve. And that is where the fine details of not being fully in control of your car. So on the previous one, he came from too far back. That's end of argument there. It would be an unfair overtake. Had it been reported, it would... Yeah, I'm talking.
Oh, you went quiet for a second there.
Oh, it's just your hearing. I'll repeat it in case I did go quiet. Yeah, so on the previous one, Hay came from too far back. That's the end of the argument. Had it been reported, it could have been a penalty to Hay. On this one, it's borderline. Is he within fair range? He's clearly much closer than he was on the first one. I still think it's potentially touched too far back, but I'd be open to a bit of leeway on that. However, it would come down to, okay, is he then in control of his car and keeping it to the apex? And the answer there would be no. Proven by the car understeering wide. So for me, I think again that would have been an unfair overtake. It's not a push to pass because the space is there to go into. He's not pushed Rich out of the way to get in the space, but it would be an unfair overtake because he's understeered into Rich. Anything else on that one?
Yeah, like you said, borderline. I feel it's borderline for the braking zone. He's not making the apex, and he's understeering away from the apex. So, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, it said, had it gone to stewards? I don't know. I'm not commenting. I'm not stewarding. I'm commentating.
Well, here's a question for you. Having seen the previous clip, Hay would seem to think that he can break that late for the corner and it's okay. I would look at it and go, it's not okay. Because
got other cars around you, and if you're not able, when we're doing overtakes, we want to do them as cleanly as possible and no contact, or little as contact as possible.
There is another part to it as well, but I'll let you carry on.
As little as possible, and you're waiting for me to figure out what you want me to say.
No. Well, I mean, what I was going to say was that if you're on your own on the track, you can brake wherever you want for a corner because it has zero effect on anybody else. But when there's other cars around, you have to brake at points that are safe and fair. That's the DGT way. Now,
or what is considered brake distance for the corner within a race, and within like a general, what you're going to brake and you're going to be able to get round the corner.
Well, that's where it comes down to: are you within fair range to attempt the overtake? See, that's why, because that question you've just asked doesn't really have an answer, because people can brake wherever they want. However, when they brake can have a massive effect on those cars around them, so they have to do it in a fair way. And one way that we can regulate that is to go, are you close enough to even attempt an overtake at this corner? If the answer is no, then it doesn't matter how late you think you can brake or how good you think you are as a driver. You're too far back for the driver ahead to have any possibility of avoiding you. And that's the key point, that the driver ahead would have to take evasive to avoid a collision, and they shouldn't have to. But that's where I would say I would look at it slightly differently and go, okay, yeah, you might in this situation like, well, hey, okay, on this occasion he's braked late, or he's braked at a point he thinks is okay, but he's understeered at the apex of the corner, right? He's not made the apex. On the previous clip, he's braked late again, what I would class as late. He's made the corner, but it's not a fair overtake. However, if we put a stopwatch on the way he goes through the corner, he's fast on the way in and slow as hell on the way out, because he's had to slow the car down so much to get it stopped that his minimum speed through the corner will be considerably lower than, say, mine would be. Now that means that through that corner I may be half a second faster than Hay through that corner. So that's why I would also look at it that way. Is, yes, you've been really fast. I mean, I'm not. It may sound like I'm digging Hay. I'm really not. This is kind of anybody really. I do hate it when people go, well, I'm faster than you on the way into the corner. So, well, yeah, well, that's because you're braking late and you're fully on the brakes for a long time and you're going really slow in the middle of the corner and you're shit slow on the exit of the corner. So I've just let you dive bomb me and I've overtaken you on the exit. What a waste of time. Why don't you just brake a little bit earlier and go through the corner faster, and if you get a decent exit, overtake me on the exit of the corner?
You know what they say?
What?
Slow in, fast out.
Yep. Like it says on the t-shirt.
Never worked for me.
Well, no. I just stick to the t-shirt slogans. I did make one, slow in, fast out.
Yep.
Well, there is. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love a Danny Ricciardo late braking overtake. I don't like dive bombs. And obviously one person's definition of a dive bomb is different to someone else's, yeah. I mean, one way you may be able to sort of give a definition to a dive bomb in DGT League is if the car is not within fair range, then it's potentially it's on the cusp of a dive bomb. So yeah,
and these videos aren't for digging at people. These videos are educating.
Exactly. That's the thing. I'd rather watch this and go, oh, right, okay, right, I see what the I have brakes. Like with the first one, you go, yeah, you know what? I'm not really close enough to overtake Twilight, so yeah, I'm not surprised. Rich was surprised I was overtaking him.
And he's free to send messages to the page, and say what he feels about the video, if it's helped him or
of course
he agrees or not.
Well, I mean, the other thing as well is, I mean, it would have been Rich did say he would have no problem in putting incidents like this into the stewards to be looked at for penalties. But that's not what Rich was interested in doing. Rich was interested in making the situation aware to all drivers that in overtakes like this, Hay should have given the position back. Now,
and with the way Richard wrote the message, it's not just the overtake from Hay that has spurred this on. It's more. It seems like it's happened throughout the season with different drivers, and it's just unfortunate that he was in this video.
I mean, to be fair, I think Hay has been driving a lot better over the course of this championship. He's been trying to race a lot cleaner. He's been trying to do things a lot better, and he has been having some really good races. This is unfortunately a situation where it may feel like we are digging at it, but genuinely we're not. And like I said, I mean, Rich could easily have put these in, but this is the thing: without the G-Spot, ladies get no pleasure, apart from when men have gone to sleep and they don't stop.
The drivers wouldn't really have the visual, how the thinking of the stewards, because it would normally be written. It wouldn't be on a video and us talking about it in a video. So it normally it'd be written, and then you'd have the messages from the driver why.
I think visuals do work better. I mean, let's put it this way: when was the last time you cracked one off to written porn?
To what?
Written porn.
To what?
Written porn.
Keep cutting out at the start.
Yeah. When was the last time you cracked one off to written porn?
Never.
Exactly. But a video? Right, that's not the reason for doing it. But no, again, to add to what you were saying there is, let's say, for example, Gary thought at Brands Hatch he'd been pushed to passed on. Now, he could easily have just continued to think that that's what had happened to him. But by asking us to have a look at it, we've been able to have a look at it and show it isn't a push to pass, and here's the reason why. But also, so for someone like Rich, who I think he says like there was a few things that happened in the race, didn't necessarily want to pick on one thing. And to be fair, it was the admins that had a look through his footage just to see what had been happening, because when a driver comes to us and says, I'm not too happy about things that happen in that race, or when we've heard that there's arguments, we do have a look into things to see what may have happened, so that we know what conversations may need to be had. So, but also, let me just get this point across. Sorry, Rich, for example, could have sat there thinking, well, Hayes done 2 overtakes on me that are absolutely shocking. However, if we'd have looked at it and gone, oh no, what Hayes done's fine. Well, by doing this G-spot and showing it, that would have then been able to show Rich, no, what Hay did was fine, and here's the reasons why, or to affirm his thought of, yeah, okay, it was potentially an unfair overtake, here's why, and we'll also make it aware to everybody. Sorry, now you can cut me off. I was talking, now you can cut me off. So, yeah, my name's Cork, and... So I give you the chance to cut me off, but you say nothing.
I forgot what I was going to say.
All right, it's all right. If I hadn't let you cut me, go on. Oh, right,
yeah, admins. Like if we hear arguments and that's what you're saying. Yeah, because we want to know what's happening within the league and just make sure everything's okay. We don't want stuff building up and then with a big blowover and it affects drivers or a driver. Yeah. So that's why sometimes when messages come through, we'll go and we'll have a sit and have a quick look through the footage.
Well, even if there's, I mean, I won't give any names, but in this week's race we had a situation where one driver sort of said to another, that was a push to pass, and the response was, no, fuck, it wasn't. Now it's 2 different people's perception, and as an admin, I mean, things didn't get heated, but it was one of those situations where it could have done. So I know I went and had a look to see what had happened, because it's useful information. Because then it's just a bit like okay, so last week when we saw okay, we've seen the footage today, the Dave the Harp last week at Dunlop's with Gary and Ray with SRI. We didn't know exactly what happened, but let's say, for example, in that scenario, Dave the Harp had gone, oh, for fuck's sake. Now, he could have just been moaning at himself, but someone else may take it that he's like accusing them of something. Now, as an admin, if we heard that and there was a heated discussion about it, we'd probably go and have a look just so that we would know what did happen. So if the conversation needed to be had, or let's say, for example, we finish this recording, we go and jump online, and one of them, like Dave, would be online, and Dave starts asking, did you see what happened? If our answer is no, we don't give a shit, that's not very good, is it? But if our answer is, well, I did have a look,
it'd be failing as a leak, to be honest.
Exactly. Because as experience has taught us, when things can get heated, it's better to be proactive than reactive. It's just so much more beneficial. Anything else to add to that one, or should we have a look at the next one?
No, can go to the next one.
Okay. Give us a countdown to play. 3, 2, 1, play. G7, race 8. They are not curb friends. Okay, this is an interesting one. This is Rich and Gary. Rich having a look at the back of SRI here, and going into the final corner. In comes Gary, spare war, and attacks Rich. They were friends. Now Rich is in the barrier. Almost a similar situation to the one we saw earlier with Gary and SGP. But there are differences. So looking at this view, it does look like Gary comes in a bit late, has a bit of a wobble and knocks Rich off. But there are differences to the one from earlier. So Gary is in fair range to attempt an overtake on Rich. Rich covers him off. There may be a tiny little bit of contact here, but there's nothing in it. there is the space for Gary to come into. So for me, there isn't a push to pass there, because I think the space is there for Gary to potentially go into.
There's at least a car width.
Yeah. So
when Gary's outside.
yeah, so they're about right. Gary on the curb though has a wobble, and looking from this view, you'd have no idea that he'd knocked Rich off. So again, it's within fair range. Rich kind of covers it off. I don't think Gary is really going for the move, but Rich has gone a bit wide. But Gary on the curb, little wobble, tiny touch. Gary leaving loads of space for Rich, and that's one thing I would say I think is different with the one with the SGP. In that situation, I think Gary is aware that he's trying to leave space for Rich on the exit of the corner. But yeah, I watched that clip a number of times, and from the view that Gary uses, you wouldn't know that you'd hit Rich off, because the contact is behind you. It's a minor contact. It's on a bit of a tank slapper. I don't think Gary would have known that bit of contact has sent Rich off. So I think in that situation, had that been reported, that could have possibly have been a penalty. But I do think it's very different to the one with SGP, because it wasn't initiated, I don't think, with a push to pass. It wasn't followed up with a little nudge in the middle of the corner, and the reason Gary's ended up making contact with Rich is unlucky. He's on the curb trying to make sure he's giving space to Rich, and he's had a wobble on the curb. There's nothing he could do about it, but it has resulted in Rich ending up off the track. So again, this is one that Rich maybe could have reported, but he's not wanted to go that route. He's wanted to go down the sort of education for everybody route. Rich for Prime Minister. Actually, I don't think that'd be a good idea.
Become Jimmy.
It'd only turn up on a Thursday. But yes, I think a lot of unfortunate in that scenario. But one that had it been reported, possibly could have been a penalty. But there was, I think, there was a lot of positives in that one. In that Gary wasn't aggressive on the way in, and he was trying to leave space on the way out. It was very different to the other one with SGP.
Yeah, it was just unfortunate. Curbing, I think I heard a gear change.
Yes, you might have done, yeah. While on the curb, I didn't have the audio on while we're talking. So, but yeah, I mean, it's an unfortunate situation. I think as well with that, I think Rich may watch this and go, right, okay, right. Gary may not have known that had happened. And to be fair, we have had a number of situations in the past, it's a bit like this, where a driver has gone, I had no idea that had happened. If I'd have known, I'd have waited for him. But in the
and then you've got so many drivers like
Twilight,
Silver Shadow, Twilight, Philip Schofield, that would take the piss and you wouldn't know if he's telling the truth or not.
Yeah.
And you would wait for him, only to find out that you done fuck all wrong.
I've just remembered what it was that Twilight's right. I think a race or two ago, an incident happened. Twilight was down the back somewhere. It was in the race that Twilight won. I think Twilight was down the back somewhere. A crash happened with a couple of cars in front of him. I think it might have been Hay and Gary actually. And Hay and Gary, I think if it was them, they were talking to each other and like, I'm sorry, blah blah blah. I'm waiting for you. And Twilight goes, no, it wasn't your fault, it was Fluffy's. Fluffy should wait for you. Well, Fluffy's up the fucking road in 4th place. And like Twilight's down in like 9th or something like that. So it's obviously just a complete fucking wind-up. But
so you can't take that unless the two drivers talk to each other or there and then you can't take it. Like, I don't know, if I hit somebody, I'll try and speak to them as much as possible if I can, but I'm not going to listen to anybody else.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I mentioned about I didn't know if I did Gary. While I was having the conversation at the time with Gary, it'd been very easy for somebody else to go, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Well,
that way you're in the moment. You're not looking at who's around you on the group, the standing list that you've got on your HUD.
Yeah.
So you're not looking at that. You're in the moment. You're driving, so you don't know who's shouting. Yeah, you did, and what position they were in, and
exactly.
So, unless it comes from the other drivers, both drivers talk to each other and say, like, yeah, you kind of done this and that, then I don't think there's much that Gary would have known about that.
Nah, I agree. I mean, it does beg the question, what would happen if someone said, oh, yeah, you should wait for him, but they actually didn't need to?
Oh.
Not a route I want to go down, I think.
That is bad.
I mean, yeah.
We'll race ban them if they do that. Only get that in the rule book.
I mean, you'd have to follow it up quickly with not really. But
you'd have to follow up before they hit the brakes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's put it this way: if I said to you, "Go and rob that bank," it's okay. You can't get done for it. Does that mean that you can't get done for it? Well, it depends on how much money you share with me, but
it depends how smart I am.
Yeah. Well, you're locked up then. Right. Okay. We've got one more to have a look at. So let's have a quick look at this one. So we'll go 3, 2, 1 and play. Oh, I'm slightly behind. So G8, race 8. I will show them how it's done. Gary. It's entry. Pit wall.
He didn't hit the wall, it hit the side.
He hit the side. Yeah, he hit the side.
What's that sign made of?
Well,
I'm just winding it.
now,
I've not seen this.
You've not seen it before? Right, okay. Now, interesting, when we recorded that race, I knew it had happened because I was in front of Gary at the time and I heard the thud and I saw his car like dancing in the pit lane. I was pissing myself at the time. And on the main footage at the same time, something else was happening further forward, so the camera was on that. On the pack cam, I think I may have just caught it, but I thought it's all right. We'll save it for this because how many? There's quite a lot of races this championship. We've had people hitting the barriers at the pit entries.
Nothing coming out. Something coming out reverse. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Now, I did tell Gary that it'd be featuring on the G-Spot this week. I didn't expect it to be as much as it has, but yeah. If you get hit the pit wall or the barrier or the sign, yeah.
So if you watches a video where he's on holiday and the holiday's crap, it's your fault.
Well, yeah. I'm saying nothing. I tell you what, he could always make a wish, right? Now, I say that because a magical genie came to me.
To what?
A magical genie came to me. Appeared to me. And he appeared! Are you fucking deaf?
No, sometimes your mic cuts out. I don't know if it's Discord or I'm not too sure.
Maybe I'm too loud for you. I'll say. Should I say it quieter? I met a magical genie. gave me one wish. I said, I wish I could be you. And the genuine, sound, weird whoosh, but you will grant what? What the hell is that?
I thought you were whispering sweet nothings in me. Should I stop?
No. I'll try and say that again. This is hard to say. I met a magical genie. He gave me one wish.
Genie gave me one wish.
I said, I wish I could be you. The genuine, sound, weird whoosh, but you will grant it. And on that bombshell, I think it's time for the end of the first G-Spot, while Ray's thinking, what the bloody hell is he on about?
Yeah, I don't know. Are you breaking up your speech? That it sounds like it's breaking up in Discord?
No, I'm not breaking up on purpose. I am saying that the genie said it was the genie said weird bush, but you will grant it. I'm not speaking Scottish either. The I.
I thought you'd speaking English.
The I became you.
Okay.
Fucking hell. Right, folks. Let us know how you think the first separated G-Spot has gone on. Good job we did this one separately. An hour and 2 minutes. It's a whole own show. Feel free to ask us to look into stuff. Mainly the weird stuff. Also, you know what we might have to do is...
Oh.
Go on.
Yeah.
Go on. No, go on.
No,
You just ejaculated everywhere, so come on.
Yeah, that's alright. I've already done it.
Of course, it's saying now. If somebody happens to do a magnificent overtake, maybe that's something we could put on the G-Spot. Like when Jimmy overtook around the outside of SGP. And we're like, how the bloody hell has it done that? But yeah, so anyway, let us know what you think. If you're watching this and you haven't seen the race videos, check them out. They're not bad, you know, they're not bad. Right, Ray, thank you for joining us on commentary and the G-Spot.
No worries at all.
Thank you very much.
Been a pleasure. I get 2 weeks break.
That we have.
I can recuperate before the next 9 weeks of shitey jokes.
Oh, don't go on. I've got 3 weeks to get some new ones. It could be worse. I could ask you the question of can you name 3 consecutive days without saying the days?
Can I what?
Can you name 3 consecutive days without naming any of the days?
Consecutive days without naming the days. First, second, and third.
It's a good guess, but no.
No.
Maybe something like yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Do you still name the day?
It's not. It's not naming it. It's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you all again soon.